from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to our Thursday night edition of the program. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And there's a bunch of reports out there tonight we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the story about the CIA operations that they're trying to link to Donald Trump and how that worked. There's been a lot of information about that, about private contractor work and CIA work. So we're going to get to the bottom of that. We're also going to look at this story that's out about the House of Representatives launching a investigation into China's meddling in the United States. And this comes as no surprise. We're also going to talk about El Tren de Aragua, right? That's the name of the organized crime gang that comes from Venezuela and actually ran its own prison, similar to MS-13, that is making its way to the United States, where its members are all over the United States, killing people, shooting people, robbing people. It's quite the spectacle. So that's part of what we're going to discuss tonight, and a lot more. But I want to get into this this story about the House Oversight Committee launching this government-wide investigation into Chinese meddling in operations in the United States, including election influence, espionage, ties to drug manufacturing, and corporate security. And I think this is a good thing, right? It's an important thing, if nothing else, that we're talking about it and it's on the radar because this stuff's all happening. The chairman of the committee, James Comer, he sent letters to 9 Biden administration agencies to investigate the resources that are being used to combat all of this influence that China has in America. And here's a quote from him. He says, "Without firing a single bullet, the Chinese Communist Party is waging war against the U.S., by targeting, influencing, and infiltrating every economic sector and community in America." And that's part of what he wrote in his statement earlier today, going on to say, "We know that this coordinated influence and infiltration campaign by the CCP threatens the U.S. military readiness, the technology sector, financial markets, agriculture, industry, education systems, and intellectual property." And these are threats that have been ongoing, right? There's nothing new about them. This has been going on for quite a while. Now, the Oversight Committee, let me see, where did I leave off with that? I wanted to make sure I got you the full quote from him. Now, he went on to say, "The lives of and security of all Americans are affected." And they reached out to a bunch of different departments, of the 9 departments that they're talking about: the Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, the DEA, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, the Treasury Department, their Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, NASA, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and the National Science Foundation. Comer added that the Oversight Committee has a responsibility to ensure the federal government is taking every action necessary to protect Americans from the Chinese Communist Party's ongoing political warfare. And as we've talked about on this program with guests like Gordon Chang and others who are really well versed on what's going on, this is an issue where there's this philosophy they have in China. It's called unrestricted warfare, where they'll do absolutely everything they can short of an actual war and invasion. Any type of warfare they can, whether it's everything he's mentioning, right? Breaking down the culture, breaking down our military from the inside, infiltrating it with an LGBTQ problem, if you will, so that it'll be weaker. This is all part of their philosophy that Xi Jinping subscribes to, this unrestricted warfare. So Comer's investigation is looking for information regarding what steps are being taken to stop the CCP, their political and economic warfare campaign, and how many more U.S. agencies are going to be called on to provide information to combat this exact type of warfare. And former President Trump's administration was looking to leverage a new trade deal with China by pressing it to address these unfair trade practices, including forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft. And I think the timing is right for this type of thing because everybody's, looking at this potential ban on TikTok, which will likely be a situation where it looks like we're stopping the bad guys, but we're probably just stopping ourselves, right? Because the Democrats never really support anything that favors the United States. They always seem to favor Iran and China and, anybody but the United States. So as much as I don't like China, and I'd love to see the ownership of TikTok divested, I have to say it's alarming to me that Nancy Pelosi is behind the ban on TikTok. And if she's behind it, it makes me think, come on, man. I played that clip of her last night. And I think if she's behind it, then we have to think a couple of times before we get involved, right? That's why I say I'm on the fence here. I don't know. As much as I don't like TikTok, I definitely don't think it's a good idea to support this bill right now. So let's see what kind of champions we get in the Senate. Now, going back to this report, Reuters published a report about the Trump administration's Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, operations against China in 2019. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit with somebody who understands spy work very, very well. And 3 former officials told Reuters that the CIA created a small team of operatives who used internet identities to share these different narratives about Xi Jinping's government to different overseas news outlets. So the CIA team that was created, they prompted and promoted different allegations that members of the ruling class within the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, were hiding ill-gotten money. They were doing this overseas, and they were being slammed as being corrupt and wasteful in China's Belt and Road Initiative. So, basically what they do to us all day was being done to them. And interesting to see how that worked out. And this was according to a report from Reuters. Comer's impeachment inquiry targeting President Joe Biden has been digging into allegations about Hunter Biden and his family and what they've been doing to peddle their influence in the United States to the Chinese companies and offering, lots of money in exchange. So this is an interesting angle to take, while we're trying to figure out what's going on with the situation with China and their influence in the United States. There's also this concurrent impeachment inquiry, which tends to focus on the same areas. So some might say this is politics. Others might say this is probably the best juxtaposition we could find to really draw some parallels here about what's working and what isn't working. So that's China and the United States, and we're going to get into that. But the problem that we have with the border, while China is definitely exploiting that, they're not the sole actor, right? There are Mexican cartels involved. There are Venezuelan organized crime families involved. And these organized crime individuals, which I'm going to call gang members, or this gang that has been called Tren de Aragua, seems to be probably the most vicious as of late to make it into the country. Outside of these cannibals in Haiti, you've got these people making their way here, and these guys specialize in selling drugs and trafficking women. And it comes as no surprise to me that we're in the position we're in, because it makes all the sense in the world. China's not going to do the dirty work themselves, but they're going to lay the groundwork to have all the dirty work done. And it looks like that's exactly what's happening, at least from my view. So we're going to talk about these Venezuelan gangs. We're going to learn more about that. We're going to talk about China, spying, all of that. We're going to touch on a little bit of what's going on in the Middle East, as well as RFK Jr., We've got RFK Jr. and his what's happening with that race, right? Is he going to affect Biden? How is he going to cut into Biden's reach into the Democrats? Will old school traditional Democrats vote for RFK Jr. and whoever he picks as a running mate? All of that remains to be seen. I think he's going to hurt Biden more than he's going to hurt Trump, that's for sure. So keep it locked right here, folks. It's going to be an action-packed show tonight. The phone number, as you know, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And as I was mentioning, we've got this Venezuelan gang that, more than a gang, I'm going to say it's organized crime, that is making its way into the United States and it is becoming very popular. Sadly, it's becoming very popular with a lot of the being attached to so much of the crime and destruction that we're seeing in recent weeks. And there was a report on this, and I want you to check it out.
The fastest growing transnational criminal organization known as the Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan gang that has now infiltrated its way into the United States through various sectors of the U.S.-Mexico border.
That here in El Paso, Tren de Aragua gang members who are identified are put into prosecution pathways for 1325 illegal entry into the United States.
According to a CNN report from Border Patrol, 38 suspected members from the Tren de Aragua have been arrested between 2022 and 2023.
When they come to a new place, they do it oftentimes through immigrant pathways, taking advantage of people from within their own community.
Tren de Aragua is taking advantage of the mass Venezuelan exodus to make their way into the country, and now they are ramping up crime in U.S. cities like Miami and Chicago.
All right, that's Orana Bataro, who's giving that report from KTSM. And I wanted to bring in somebody who understands this stuff, who's been following this as this is what he does. And Joseph Humire, he's the executive director, of the Secure Free Society. And the Center for a Secure Free Society, they dedicate themselves to understanding this stuff. He says this a lot better than I do, so I want to bring him into the conversation. Joseph, welcome to the program.
No, good evening. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
You bet. So we're talking about El Tren de Aragua and what this is presenting to the United States at this time. Help us understand a little bit about the roots of this transnational criminal organization.
Yeah, this is interesting because this is, and as the report mentioned, this is the fastest growing transnational criminal organization in the world. You know, about 6 years ago, they had a presence in only 2 countries, their home base Venezuela and then their neighbor Colombia. And now they have a presence in 10 countries in the Western Hemisphere, including the United States. And their origin obviously goes back to Venezuela. And this goes all the way back to 20 plus years ago, when they had basically unions inside some of these syndicates inside the country that would be protesting, and then they end up be getting involved in corruption. So that's what these infamous trains are about, because there were unions that were protesting outside this train network that's inside the country. But that's almost irrelevant at this point, because they really took an inflection point in 2007. In 2007, the Minister of Interior of Venezuela at the time, a gentleman named Tarek El Aissami, who's a Syrian, Lebanese, Venezuelan. He created this system. He reformed the penal code of Venezuela. He created a system called the Pranatos. The Pranatos is basically turning over the prison to the prisoners by creating a network of gang leaders that would run the order of the prisons. It sounds ridiculous, but it was a way to cut costs inside Venezuela and probably had some more nefarious purposes in the long run. By 2011, the Venezuelan government created something called the Ministry of Penitentiary, the Ministry of Prisons. And with this Ministry of Prisons, they basically did prison transfers and consolidated a lot of the Pranato leaders, which are called the Pranes, into a specific prison in the state of Aragua. It's a state in the northern part on the Caribbean coast of Venezuela. And so essentially the Chavez, then Hugo Chavez, the former and deceased leader, president of Venezuela, now Nicolas Maduro, who was then vice president, now president of Venezuela, they created the conditions in terms of consolidating the prison network inside Venezuela to empower the Tren de Aragua, because the Tren de Aragua gets empowered by the inter-prison transfer of the Pranatos, of the Pranes from the Pranatos. And then in 2020, fast forward several years, when COVID hits, they start to shut down these prisons. And as they shut down these prisons, they start to release the prisoners, and then we get the expansion of the Tren de Aragua. Now, the Tren de Aragua already started expanding through the migration pathways of the Venezuelans, but that was mostly happening in South America. They don't really start hitting North America until 2021, a little bit in 2020, and then mostly in 2021. And the logistics that allowed them to move north was two things again by the Venezuelan government creating those infrastructure. One is an air bridge to Mexico through the national state-owned airline of Venezuela, Conviasa, who was sanctioned by then the U.S. government, would fly more flights into Mexico than to any other source destination in the world. And obviously a lot of that was to shuttle the migrants. And then the second was the existing Venezuelan migrant pathway through Colombia was then steered towards the Darien Gap, a once uncrossable border crossing between in the jungles between Colombia and Panama, which has now become basically a bridge between Colombia and Panama by financing NGOs that developed that pathway. So they built the land bridge to the Darien Gap, an air bridge into Mexico, and that's why 2021 we saw the numbers of Venezuelan nationals creep up to the numbers that they are today, and the Tren de Aragua followed right behind.
Now, Joseph Humire from SFS, let me ask you this question, and you were clear. I just want to make sure for the sake of the audience. This grew and got the potency that it has because they had a presence in the jails, and the government in Venezuela decided to hand over the prisons to the inmates by allowing them to choose who they wanted to be the warden.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly that's what it's called, a pran. That's exactly what they did in Venezuela.
That's absolute insanity. And obviously the inmates have taken over the asylum. Joseph, stick with me. We're coming right back. Folks, we're coming right back with Joseph Humire. He is the founder of the Center for a Secure Free Society. And we're going to continue this discussion on this Venezuelan criminal organization known as El Tren de Aragua. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation with Joseph Humire. He is the founder of the Center for a Secure Free Society. And Joseph, we left off, you were explaining some of the origins of El Tren de Aragua, this Venezuelan criminal organization that is wreaking havoc in the United States. But I guess it first started branching out into Colombia and other areas, and now is making its way further north. And what can you tell us with respect to how they fit into the larger puzzle? Are they working with the Mexican cartels? Are they working with China? What do you know?
So in some ways, they do work with a lot of these other organized crime elements, probably most notably the Gulf Cartel in Colombia, because that's the main pathway to the Darien Gap. But I'd say they're less competition to those other cartels because they don't really dabble as much in drug trafficking. They're not known to be too much of narco traffickers. Their expertise, their specialization is in human smuggling. They actually smuggle migrants. That's where their comparative advantage lies, and particularly human smuggling related to Venezuelan migrants. And that's the largest mass migration in the world. Upwards of 8 million Venezuelans have fled that country since 2014. So that gives them a comparative advantage to be able to work with the other cartels that are also involved in human smuggling and human trafficking, but without having to step on any turf that has to do with drugs or narcotics. So that's one of the angles I think that allowed them to expand so quickly, because they're not really competing on the drug markets, which oftentimes that would create competition, which in the case of drug trafficking leads to violence. The other side of this is, and this is I think the big point, is you really don't get that kind of expansion without some type of state support. And in this case, at least indirectly, you do find state support from the Venezuelan government, and I'll explain that. Because the way the human smuggling operations work, from Venezuela all the way through Central America into Mexico and even throughout South America, is it begins by basically human smuggling facilitators that work with the Tren de Aragua, which are many times the smugglers, work with travel agencies that provide the packaging, transportation companies, which are state-owned like airlines, Conviasa, and others, and the immigration agency, which oftentimes provides the visas or the documentation necessary to get to some of the primary countries. And so that is basically an organized crime racket where the Tren de Aragua is at the center of it, because they're the smugglers, but they work within a larger industry and a bigger network. Human smuggling and its twin cousin, human trafficking, which is sex trafficking, is basically come to become a bonanza of a booming industry that it rivals drug trafficking, to the point that even the infamous Mexican cartels have diversified the revenue streams to focus as much on human smuggling, human trafficking, as they do on narcotics.
Wow. This is an interesting thing. Now, how did this organized crime enterprise, El Tren de Aragua, how did they get involved in human smuggling, human trafficking, if they were primarily in charge of a prison?
But mostly because the Venezuelan migrants, because they were able to, their main sources of revenue when they were in the prisons was extortion, was basically they would charge taxes to prisoners and their families. And so they were like an organized crime racket that would extort the prisoners and their family networks. But when the migrants started to push abroad, and then the Tren de Aragua followed afterward, they had an innate understanding of how these communities were formed. And they're kind of organic in some ways, because the massive amounts of Venezuelans that went into Colombia, then Ecuador, then Peru, then Chile, it's all kind of like every diaspora works with, family members, tells another family member, they move to this neighborhood. And the Tren de Aragua understood how to follow that. And so they continued their extortion racket that they're doing inside Venezuela through the prisons into the neighboring countries, into like basically these Venezuelan communities. And then they just figured out that there's a big business that has to do with human smuggling, and they can make a lot more money than extortion. And then they morphed into that. They're now into all kinds of other illicit activities. They do prostitution. They do retail theft. In Bogota, there was a huge problem with the stealing of iPhones, because apparently the Tren de Aragua figured out a way to unlock iPhones. I don't know how they did that, but they did it. And so they were on a shopping spree stealing iPhones all throughout Bogota. They're huge into prostitution. They have a huge prostitution ring in Lima, Peru. But more recently, we started to really see their capabilities escalate when they were able to assault and attack police officers. In Chile, there are cases of the Tren de Aragua kidnapping and killing police officers. And that's where really things started to get to the limelight of the South American authorities. But now that we're starting to see the beginning of that here in the United States, don't be surprised if you start seeing Tren de Aragua kill and kidnap police officers here in the United States as well, because they've already proven that they can do that.
And it's part of their MO. Now, I'm looking at a report from coming out of the UK, Daily Mail, and it says that Venezuelan authorities have announced they've freed at least 100 prisoners since Friday. And I find this interesting because they're considering more inmate review cases to let more people out. This seems to me like a direct middle finger to the United States and anybody else who's receiving these migrants. And it seems to be that these gang members are all coming to the United States. Am I right?
You're right. And so let me back up a little bit, because I think for the audience to really kind of get a sense of the scope here, I think, when we talk about Tren de Aragua, yes, they're a criminal organization. Yes, they're fast growing. They're present in all these countries. But I think the big impetus of all this is really to make sure that people understand that they wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for the Venezuelan government. I mean, much the way I think Iran supports Hezbollah and has as a proxy in the world of terrorism, the Tren de Aragua is probably and most likely a state-sponsored transnational criminal organization. That's how they've been able to get capabilities so quickly and become so powerful and so fast. And in that, anything that Venezuela does, whether it's releasing prisoners from prisons in Venezuela or creating these transportation networks, whatever they do, it's strategic. It's meant to weaponize migration. It's meant to use migration as a maximum pressure campaign against the United States. They can't sanction us. They can't politically isolate us. But what they can do is they can flood us with drugs, with migrants, and terrorists. And that's exactly what they're doing. So this is, in many ways, asymmetric warfare on behalf of Nicolas Maduro and his international allies, which is Iran, Russia, China, the main adversaries of the United States. So they figured this out. And I draw emphasis again, whether it's the Central American caravans, whether it's the Haitian migration, or now the massive Venezuelan migration, you can draw links of all those waves of mass migration to the Maduro regime. And so they've basically figured out how to weaponize migration and using it to help collapse the U.S. southern border.
Very interesting stuff. Folks, again, we are on with Joseph Humire. He is an expert in international terrorism and this transnational organized crime syndicate known as El Tren de Aragua that comes out of Venezuela. And Joseph, I want to ask you to stick with me. We're going to take a quick pause right here. We're going to come back. I find this incredibly both scary and fascinating at the same time. Folks, stick with us. We're coming back with Joseph Humire discussing this Venezuelan organized crime.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation with Joseph Humire. He is the executive director of a think tank called the Center for Secure Free Society. And Joseph Humire, it's evident that you have a wealth of information about this topic, which is, in my opinion, a very, very interesting topic, whereas it's not just a organized crime syndicate out of Venezuela, but more so a de facto state-sponsored organized crime syndicate from Venezuela that is making its way through, South and Central America into North America, into so many of our cities right now. And I find it to be a very interesting body of work that you commit yourself to. And I'm looking at your background. You served in the Marine Corps in the United States, and you attended George Mason University. And great achievements. I just don't see the connection on how you become an expert on this particular body of work. How did you make that leap?
Okay, that's a good question because, you're right. My background, I was in the Marine Corps, but that was mostly my deployments were to the Middle East, as can be expected. Right. That was in the early 2000s. And, but, what it did help me that period of time was help me understand the Middle Eastern threat networks, right? Because I was looking at Iran, Hezbollah that were in Iraq. Well, Hezbollah, no, but Iran had a heavy presence in southern Iraq, which is Shia-controlled, Shia-populated. And then, obviously, George Mason studied economics, so that really didn't have much to do with it. But what eventually it did, and this is, I guess, the real bridge, is I became interested in Middle Eastern threat networks, but I wanted to see how they were affecting globally. I wasn't so much interested in how they're doing in the region, in Middle East.
Right.
And what I came to find out is that that, many of the countries in Latin America have a heavy intrusion of these Middle Eastern threat networks, most notably Hezbollah, but not only Hezbollah, and that they're much more powerful than people think. They're involved in the narcotics trade, they're involved in human smuggling, they're involved in contraband, but they're also involved in political operations to help build political networks on behalf of Iran. And so let's look at Venezuela, for example, and I'm going to give you a data point that might, surprise a lot of your listeners, but essentially, there are more Venezuelan nationals in Syria than there are in Brazil, right? Wow. So there's 350,000 Venezuelans that live in Syria, and there's 270,000 that live in Brazil. Why is that? Because over time, there's been a network that's developed from migration that happened 100 years ago from the Middle East to Venezuela, then, now went back to Syria when Chavez years came up. And essentially that developed an immigration network that got used by terrorist networks, most notably Hezbollah. And so what that really started to illuminate in my mind was how complex these threats are in Latin America, because people look at it and they think it's just cartels, it's just criminal organizations. But in reality, there are threat networks that converge between drug trafficking, international terrorism, arms proliferation, human smuggling. But at the highest level, they're criminalized states, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, Russia, that are empowering these networks and using them as a sort of an asymmetric weapon against the West. So that's kind of how it led into it. It led by starting in the Middle East, and it kind of just brought me to Latin America. And people don't get this, but Venezuela is largely controlled by Iran and Hezbollah, more than Cuba, more than Russia, more than any other power that's in the country.
Wow, I didn't realize that influence was that deep. Now, if that is the case, it's my opinion, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, that the United States has never had, other than maybe Reagan, has had very little interest in eliminating threats in Latin America. Chavez, Maduro, it's kind of like they bark and we say a few things and, maybe there's some policy stuff, but nothing really happens. Same with Castro, right? There's a lot of talk, but nothing really happens. And I think they're used to that, and that's why as long as they know that they can exist and do what they do, they don't care. So what would it take for intervention to happen of the United States to, I guess, neutralize the threat that's posed by Venezuela, if there is such a threat? And B, do you think that would ever happen?
Okay, so two things. The first, you're absolutely right. We haven't had a strategy for Latin America for a long time. Arguably the Cold War under President Reagan, but that was mostly Central America, and it was about fighting the Soviet Union's containment strategy. Right. Maybe go back to Kennedy and the Alliance for Progress. He had some stuff, but in the 21st century, we completely abandoned Latin America, which doesn't make any sense, but it's what we did. We pivoted to the Middle East, and then we looked at Asia. And essentially, we left the vacuum. And that vacuum, as vacuums tend to do, became filled. It became filled by the adversaries, the United States, Iran, Russia, China, started to become more prominent inside the region. But then the kind of moving over to the second part of your question, which is like, how has this affected it and what can we do about it? So, this begins with, I think, everything that we're seeing, whether it's the Tren de Aragua from Venezuela, the crisis on the southern border, the calamity that is Venezuela and Cuba, Nicaragua, and those countries, these are all symptoms of the failures of U.S. foreign policy. Our negligence of Latin America is coming home to roost, and it's first happening on our southern border. So naturally, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rebuild the community. We can't just wait for this to fix it on its own, because it's going to affect us directly. So we're going to have to actually have a strategy for Latin America. We're going to have to reassert the United States as a prominent partner in Latin America. We're going to have to isolate and block China, who's quickly becoming the partner preference for many Latin American countries. And we're going to have to squeeze out the criminalized regimes that are occupying in Venezuela, Nicaragua, and other countries throughout the region. That's going to require political will. President Trump was the first president that actually made an effort to actually isolate the Venezuelan regime. Just like they did with Iran, they had a maximum pressure campaign against Nicolas Maduro and his government. The problem was, it wasn't the policy. The policy was a good policy. The problem was the diagnosis. Because at the time when President Trump wanted to do something about Venezuela, the U.S. government had no understanding of the problem. The U.S. government had not been focused on Venezuela. They had not been analyzing Venezuela. So the options were very limited. Now we know a lot more, and now we would know exactly what are the pressure points and how to do that. But the thing about Venezuela is you can't think of it like a normal country. It's not Switzerland. Venezuela is a network. It doesn't function like a government. It functions like a network. And the big powers of that network aren't inside Venezuela. They're in countries like Brazil, in Colombia, in Mexico, or even far afield in Syria. So to go after the network, you got to build a network. So I'll kind of, my final point on that would be to say we're going to have to build an alliance throughout Latin America that's going to allow us to isolate these threats and contain these criminalized governments. For example, I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have right now is in Argentina. The new government of President Javier Milei. I mean, just a few months ago, that government was antagonistic to the United States. It was very cozy with Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. Now Maduro just closed his airspace to Argentina because he's upset about a plane that was piloted by IRGC pilots and was detained in Argentina, and they seized it and they sent it to the United States, and we destroyed it. So now Maduro's up in arms. That means that anything that pisses off Maduro is probably a good thing, and that's what Javier Milei is doing. So we have the tremendous opportunity to build a partnership with a major country. This is not like a small country. This is the wealthiest country in Latin America, Argentina, and that's how you begin. We lost an opportunity with Brazil with President Bolsonaro, but we could regain it with Argentina. We have elections in Mexico this year, and we're just going to have to go one by one.
Joseph Humire, can you stick with me for like a couple of more minutes so we can wrap up and let everybody know where to find you?
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, we're coming right back with Joseph Humire. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Joseph Humire is the executive director for the Center for a Secure Free Society. And Joseph, I see the picture very differently now, more clearly, I should say, based on the information that we've discussed tonight. And I think it's interesting to see how these things are operating as networks and how they're all kind of interrelated with a lot of the threats that come out of the Middle East, which is, I knew that China had a lot of influence in Panama and other places. I didn't know how pervasive it was throughout the rest of South America, Central America. All that being said, how ultimately, in half a minute or a minute or so that we have remaining, how do you see this playing out?
Well, I mean, really, it just comes down to one simple thing. I mean, the United States, and it's a matter of national security and foreign policy, either wins in Latin America or we're going to lose throughout the world. I mean, we're not going to be able to help our allies in Israel, in Ukraine, Taiwan, or anywhere if our neighborhood completely falls apart, if our border collapses. So the United States is going to have to prioritize Latin America. I mean, you can't have, like, just to put it in a micro perspective, you can't have the nicest house in the poorest neighborhood. Eventually, the house is gonna get robbed. It's gonna collapse. Right. So, using kind of the President Trump's moniker, like "Make America Great Again," you can't make America great again unless you make the Americas great again. And I think that's going to have to be the policy of the next administration.
We'll leave it there. Let me and everybody that's listening know how they can keep up to speed with your scholarly activity.
Well, our website, securefreesociety.org. You can find a lot of our work on there. We have a podcast called Border Wars Podcast on YouTube, and you can find me at JM Humire on X.
JM Humire on X. Folks, give him a follow. Sir, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate you staying up late with us tonight.
Thank you, Rich. Great honor to be on.
You bet. Honor was mine. Folks, we're coming right back. We continue our discussion on the spy work that's going on, the CIA, and more. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, Here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 2 of the program. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And earlier I mentioned this program that President Trump had authorized a specific campaign to a clandestine campaign to use social media, Chinese social media, to turn public opinion in China against the Chinese. You know, basically what they do to us. And this is according to Reuters, reporting that former United States officials with direct knowledge of this highly classified operation are now talking about it. Now, I don't know the strategic importance of the timing. I don't know if this stuff is fake, phony fraud, if it's BS, if it's true, why it's coming out now. But we're going to find out because our guest, retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, is an Army intelligence man, and he's the president of the London Institute for Policy, and he's our guest now. Tony Shaffer, welcome back, sir.
Rich, always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for staying up late. Now,
Sure.
this story, 3 former officials are telling Reuters that the CIA created a small team of operatives who used bogus internet identities to spread negative narratives about Xi Jinping's government while leaking disparaging intelligence to overseas news outlets. Now, I would imagine this is what the CIA does all the time. I'm wondering why we're seeing this come to light as of late. What are your thoughts on this?
So I think it has to do with the whole TikTok thing. I mean, the issue of what are we doing? Why are we doing it? I mean, there's been a debate on both sides. People I respect, to include President Trump, is saying, yeah, well, we shouldn't be so quick to get rid of TikTok, even though he personally had gone down that path to get rid of it. And
Right.
just for the record, I think we should ban it. And here's why. Weaponized technology. One of the things, Rich, if you look carefully at my bio, is the acknowledgement when I retired back in 2011 that I was leading a task force that did essentially weaponization of technology. Now, technology can be everything from a pen you use, like Keanu Reeves, old John Wick might use. You know, technically, a pen is a technology, and you can use it to kill people. You know, fair enough.
Okay.
Or the internet. The internet is a form of technology that can be weaponized, as we know. So the timing of this is peculiar by the fact that, you know, we see Trump now rolling back on the path to returning to the White House, and an acknowledgement, I think, that he was being a bit more aggressive than maybe he was getting credit for. Now, just for the audience to understand, I was not directly involved. I have no direct knowledge of what they're talking about. With that said, I will acknowledge I did have discussions on these topics with Mike Pompeo when he was director of CIA, and that the concepts that are talked about were not something that the director was not aware of. So I'll leave it at that.
Understood. Now, that being said, I agree with you. I think it has something to do with the TikTok thing. And I'm wondering from a political perspective, and you know, you and I have talked about this while you were brass and you are a spy. Everybody has to dabble in politics, right? Because that's how things get done. And I'm wondering, what's your political perspective on this getting through the Senate? I tend to think it's going to fly right through. I don't see how that there's enough people that would be in opposition, enough Rand Pauls, enough maybe Ted Cruz's out there, and I don't even know their positions, but there's only a handful of heroes in the Senate, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So what do you think? Does this thing, is this pretty much a foregone conclusion?
I think it is. And I'm torn on it because I get what they're saying. It's like, you know, we shouldn't be trying to remove alternate venues, platforms that, you know, provide Americans the ability to express themselves. I get it. I'm all for it. I'm a big First Amendment right. I'm a libertarian when it comes to this stuff. With that said, Rich, I'm torn because, geez, the stuff I see playing out in the news today, to include this TikTok thing, we knew 20 years ago, 25 years ago, this could be done. Technology is ambivalent to the user. It doesn't have a direction it goes, whether good or bad. It is like a gun. It will be used for good or bad depending on the user. And unfortunately, I think TikTok, you have to look at its origins. Where did it come from? ByteDance, who essentially, although the Chinese government says, well, we don't own it. Well, they're a communist country, and any company that exists essentially exists only because the Communist Party allows it to happen. They are communists. So the data, what happens to the data, what the programs do when they're on your phone, these are all things which I feel outweigh the need to have those things acknowledged that, hey, the Chinese can collect on you. They can drop information in and out. The very things that you're talking about, Rich, you're mentioning in that article regarding President Trump authorizing that, is what the Chinese are doing via TikTok. So this is where I do have to side with the idea that we have to focus on national security and inform and educate the American people that if you got TikTok on your phone, you got the Chinese listening to everything you do. Now, with that said, I'm not saying that other things don't do that as well. Zuckerberg and Instagram, they collect all sorts of things too. I'm not saying that they're the only ones. I'm just saying that we have to acknowledge that the Chinese military, the Chinese intelligence system, has used weaponized technology. TikTok is a weapon to infiltrate and get into the lives of millions of Americans. And that's the fact, and I think that's why the legislation is moving like it is.
Now, I don't disagree with you on that front. I really don't. I think that TikTok presents a threat. The issue I have is that when this act came out, the Mark Warner version of it, the Restrict Act, it was very problematic. It said we're going to ban TikTok, and I think a lot of people said, all right, cool, yeah, they're the bad guys, no problem. However, it also included all these provisions that would say, like, we don't like londoncenter.org or richvaldez.com.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. I'm with you on that because I don't trust the government. So
right.
You and I had this conversation in person where I just told you, and I'll say it again here for your audience.
Sure.
Look, some of the weapon systems and the technology we developed to go against bad guys during my days running clandestine and black operations, I saw turned against the American people over the last 10 years. And it's frightening because when, people like me were engaged in working to develop these techniques, tools, and technology, the presumption was they would only be used against foreign targets. And lo and behold, they were turned against the American people. It's very frightening. And I'm not sure what the answer is. And I'm with you on this because I've seen it personally up front and directly.
Right. So this is where, I feel ambivalent about this. And honestly, I'm not a member of Congress, nor are you. So we're not going to get to vote on this.
Right.
And this is where I think it becomes problematic. And the last time we had a big bill, I mean, not this big, but like Obamacare, that took a long time to turn back a lot of parts of, and it's still lingering around, right? So I think eventually this could be a new political football that we will kick down the road to try and get rid of if it does, in fact, include these poison pills like the Restrict Act did that would allow the government to go ahead and do more of what they're already doing, which is spying and colluding with banks to censor people that all they've got to do is say that, you and I are extremists, and voila, we're on a list, and now we can't bank, we can't do this. We're seeing it happen with parents that speak out at school board meetings, getting the threat tag of violent domestic extremist, domestic terrorist. So I look at that and I think, geez, if we're already domestic terrorists because we like school choice, and we don't want our children to be exposed to different sexual teachings, then just imagine what happens with this. So. It's a difficult place to land in, Tony Shaffer.
Oh, I agree. So this is look, we've seen this with the Patriot Act. I've been one who said on the record, I'm saying again now, we never needed the Patriot Act to go after Al Qaeda and global terrorists. It was something that has become a tool for the FBI to use to go look at things they're not supposed to. And so I'm with you. And this is one of those things that I do feel, I agree with Rand Paul, Senator Paul, we need to get rid of it. It doesn't actually help us go after bad guys. It's become a tool, to your point, of looking at the people who the political party in charge, Democrats, don't like, and they're going to use it against those people. So, no, I'm with you. And that's one of the things I'd like to believe President Trump will do. And as a matter of fact, if I'm asked to advise, I'm going to be advising him to do what he can to remove government intrusions into the lives of Americans, period, because it's not something that the founding fathers would support. And yeah, it's a very dangerous thing when Congress does any law that gives plenary responsibility or authority of the federal government to just go look at things. It's a very dangerous thing.
Well put. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer was a national security advisor to the Trump campaign, and we are going to continue our conversation with him. We're going to pivot to what's happening in the Middle East when we return. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So when we just had one of your Democratic colleagues, Congressman Moskowitz, on the show last night, he suggested that, for example, when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war, that China is using TikTok's algorithms to ramp up divisions in this country. And that's one of the concerns that he has in terms of national security. Do you think there's any validity to that?
What I do think that people are finding discomfort is the fact that for the first time in our nation's history, Americans have access to real images of the horrors that are experienced by Palestinians daily. And the onslaught that is taking place, this horrific assault on Gaza, really is being streamed to every single person here in this country. So we no longer have to rely on legacy media to get that information.
Now, that is, of course, Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She's been calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip and saying that we don't have to rely on legacy media. And I guess they took that the wrong way because CNN came out swinging. One of their commentators, Scott Jennings, had this to say.
Were you surprised to hear her say pretty clearly she would support President Biden in November? Some of her colleagues, I'm not sure they would say that today.
No, she's a Democrat. They're going to vote for Biden. I'm not surprised about that. I am surprised that in the year of our Lord, 2024, there is a public relations agent for Hamas sitting in the United States Congress.
And CNN called her a PR agent for Hamas. And, of course, AOC and the rest of the squad, they took exception to that. I want to get your take on this, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, spy chief and former national security advisor to the Trump campaign. What are your thoughts on what's going on in Hamas and this in particular, the fact that we have some pro-Hamas activists right in the U.S. Congress?
Well, I've been saying, Rich, that you have the Hamas caucus, which you do. I mean, right. Come on, let's be honest here. And they are essentially spokesmen for Hamas, and they amplify the message. And it's horrible. And the fact is, the Israelis are responding with, I believe, the correct amount of force in a precise way, and they're winning. And they, unfortunately, these members of Congress, Ilhan Omar and Tlaib and all the others, essentially are trying to provide, and I'll be blunt, aid and comfort to the enemy. It's not good. And when you examine this, the recent activities, the recent policy shifts, the recent comments, have all been designed, especially just today. For example, the White House was trying to message about how much they're trying to overthrow now Netanyahu. It's like, oh, we're trying to get rid of him. And guess where Biden was campaigning? Michigan. This is all about 10 to 20% of their electorate, Rich. That is, say, the Democrats, because folks obviously in Minnesota and Michigan are not digging the President Biden's sitting on the fence. As a matter of fact, not only really sitting on the fence, I think he's taken a side. I think he actually is on the side of Hamas, because they keep they're trying to actively support democracy by undermining it. By trying to Chuck Schumer today talking about encouraging folks to remove Netanyahu. So this is all about politics, and that's what we're seeing.
You know, Tony Shaffer, I think you're right here, and it's funny how the domestic policy seems to drive what is going on in the Biden campaign, and it's a very sad day, and they play both sides of the fence every single time. Now, moving forward to 24, we have about a minute and a half to go. What are how do you perceive things going with foreign policy, with this, mainly with this conflict? Do you think this conflict gets wrapped up? Do you think Biden's successful in trying to replace Netanyahu in Israel so that maybe they can put an end to this? Does he weather the storm? What are your thoughts?
So I think the Israelis are going to prevail. They're going to go into Rafah very soon, within a few days. I think it'll be over by early April. I think they'll be pretty much done with it. Biden himself and what to look for. The Ukrainians are losing. This has been an underreported story. The Russians are now preparing to return to the offensive. Macron, president of France, wants to send French troops into Ukraine. That'll be hilarity at its finest, I'm thinking. The big thing, Rich, is you have the equivalent of a high school debating team in charge of national security, and their job is to get Biden reelected. So everything you see them do between now and November will all be working to triangulate foreign policy, national security, based on what they think will sell to the domestic audience. My prediction is it's going to collapse upon itself, and we're going to have to pay some pretty hefty prices, unfortunately.
Yeah, I wish I didn't agree with you on that one, but I think you're right. Tony Shaffer, let everybody know how to keep in touch with you and the work that you're doing at the London Center.
Sure. So T-Spooky on Twitter, always there to comment on things, and then projectsentinel.com or .net. That's where we are working to restore the essentials of the Founding Fathers' concepts and policies to our current society and national security. So, Rich, always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Brother, thank you. Keep carrying that torch for liberty. I really appreciate you. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I really appreciate you staying up late with us.
Thank you.
You bet. Folks, we're coming back more on what's going on with RFK Jr. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
An independent candidate for president, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., says he plans to announce his vice presidential running mate here in Oakland on March 26. The venue for that announcement hasn't been released yet, but Kennedy made headlines this week, telling the New York Times that NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers and former Minnesota Governor Jesse Ventura are among the frontrunners for the job.
So that report from KTVU on the RFK Jr. campaign, his latest about the short list of possible VP picks. And I want to talk a little bit about this and how this third-party run is going to affect things. Is this going to cut into Biden? Is it going to cut into Trump? I would suppose probably both. But I'm trying to figure out which one it's going to affect more. For that, I want to bring in Raven Harrison, a political strategist. She ran for Congress, and she's with us right now. Raven Harrison, welcome back.
Good evening.
How are you?
So far, so good.
Yeah, still here. Thank God. So what do you think about this RFK Jr. campaign? I have to tell you, my take is that I thought that this would have made a way bigger ripple, a way bigger dent. And I feel like it didn't make anything during the primary. And him going independent as quickly as he did kind of let me know, or indicated to me, I should say, that the Kennedy brand is really either not welcomed in today's Democrat Party or just doesn't have the gravitas it once did.
Well, correct. You've got a lot of things to unpack there, and they're all valid. You know, the Kennedy era Democrat has been gone for quite a while, and RFK is still not that Democrat, but the problem he has is he couldn't get the support. Even his legacy and his name couldn't carry him in the Democrat Party because it's gone so far left. So he jumped out immediately, went to the independent, and he's done pretty well to swell a pot of like 22%, 24% by more moderate estimates of people who are in that pot. The problem is his policies has not changed. He still, has a Democratic platform, and right now that's what's under attack. So he's got some names he's going to bring in to try to reinvigorate it, but he really doesn't have a message that's entirely different. He's got one that's different than Biden's, but it's not distinguishable from the Democrats on a whole. So it's going to be interesting. He's taking from both. He's pulling from both. But ultimately, the ground that Biden is losing among Jewish voters, black voters, and young voters is not going to be able to be made up in that pool. So it's going to be who's going to be stronger at courting that pot.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Now, I'm looking at this piece in Fox News where they're drawing some parallels between Biden's race and those of the past that had third-party candidates and how it benefited Republicans. Yes. And I do believe that if anybody's going to vote, well, I shouldn't say if anybody, because I think it is kind of split. And maybe you could weigh in on this, and you might have a better handle than I do. I haven't really looked at this, but I think Kennedy appeals to a lot of folks that are anti-vaccine, which took up residence. I think many of them took up residence, or many folks on the conservative side became some of those people back in 2020 and remained them. Then I think there's also the rest of his policies, which are very progressive in my opinion, or at least left-leaning, where I think he's going to cut into some of the Biden stuff. And I don't know which way it swings further, but what are your thoughts in that regard?
Well, yeah, I mean, there have been a lot of parallels made. Most people are making the parallel right now to the preamble to the Reagan and Carter matchup.
Right.
So this is what a lot of them are drawing a parallel to, and that was because the Achilles for Carter was having the Iran hostage crisis. There was a situation in the Middle East that completely derailed him, and it gave Reagan leverage to get in there. The third-party independent was not as much as a factor. Typically, it hovered around 3%. So it was just more of a luxury to have it swing one or the other, whereas now at 24%, whether you believe the conservative or the more progressive estimates of Trump having 46, Biden having 41, 42%, neither one of those can win without dipping into that pot. So you've got RFK, who stands strong on vaccine freedom of not being forced to be a vaccine, but then he stands on wanting to take the guns. So he's pro-medical freedom, but anti-Second Amendment. So he doesn't really have a strong home among conservatives with that. And if, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So if Carter lost his edge and that kind of foothold in the Democratic dynasty over Middle Eastern conflict, then Biden should be pretty worried about now.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. Folks, we're on with Raven Harrison. She's a political pro, and you want to check her out at ravenharrison.com. We're coming back. I want to continue our conversation about 2024 and maybe switch gears a little bit to the news yesterday or the day before that Trump and Biden both clinched the nomination, which I think was expected for everybody. But now that we're there, how you see the rest of this campaign unfolding. Folks, don't go anywhere. Open Phone America, by the way, coming up at the top of the hour, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Raven Harris.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There is more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
When you look at it, there's something going on because they're going after me viciously. Then all of a sudden it comes out that Biden took 10 times the number of documents that I did. And I took them very legally, and I wasn't hiding them. We had boxes on the front of and a lot of those boxes had clothing, and we're moving out, okay? Unfortunately, we're moving out of the White House. And because we're moving out of the White House, our country's going to hell. But we weren't hiding anything. He was. And then you see him in with his Corvette. Nobody ever mentions the one, though, that's the worst, is he had him in Chinatown. And those were boxes that were used. If you take a look at those boxes there was a lot of activity in those boxes. They show pictures of them. These were boxes that were used. In Mar-a-Lago, we had the Secret Service. We had all sorts of security. We had everything. And what he did was far more egregious. I mean, what I did, I had protection. I had the right to do it, in my opinion, and in my lawyer's opinion, and everything else.
There you have President Trump again making the case of why he shouldn't be in trouble, and B, why Biden should. And I think Special Counsel Hur kind of reiterated some of that with his findings. But it brings us to the news of the day, right, with Trump v. Biden Part 2. Raven Harrison, welcome back. I think a lot of folks are enthused by this rematch, and an equal number of a lot of folks are not enthused by this rematch. From that perspective, what's your sense in your part of the world, and what's your read on Trump versus Biden Part 2?
Well, I think the ones who are enthused about it are the ones who were enthusiastic the first time. What you're seeing right now is this has been a complete weaponization of our government. Every single thing that they accused Trump of doing, they said he was going to get us into wars. They said he was going to crash the economy. They said that he was going to absolutely destroy our country, that he was going to send prices soaring. Everything they accused Trump of has happened under the Biden administration. That's not speculation, that's fact. So what you have is the Dems are in an absolute panic because, one, they are hemorrhaging votes. They are hemorrhaging votes because of how the situation in the Middle East on October 7th unfolded, the lack of stance for Israel, the rampant inflation, the wide open border. As of yesterday, we have migrants being flown in from Haiti now. So it's not like it's not bad enough that our border is being overrun, but we're flying them in from other, torn, devastated countries. And that's where we are. So right now, this guy cannot make a coherent sentence, and they know. So this, in my opinion, is what you're seeing. Is you're seeing mass panic with the Dems. They are desperate to throw something at President Trump. That clip you played, exactly perfect, because the bottom line is the president has the right to declassify anything he chooses to, and the vice president does not. So Biden was not legally able to be in possession of any of those, whether he willingly handed them over, whether he didn't. He wasn't allowed to have them, period. And the fact that he's not being prosecuted because they say he's too infirm is outrageous. But now what we have to do is watch the play. And, Rich, that's what I think we are right now. We knew this was going to be the matchup. So they've thrown everything legally. Those cases are falling apart. So they're trying to bankrupt him. The last play is going to be the one nobody saw coming, which is, I believe they're going to do the summertime switcheroo with Biden. They're going to take him out because he is infirm. So what happens is if he secures the nomination and then steps down, then it goes back to the DNC to choose the nominee. So that will allow them to slip in whoever they want without the scrutiny and the vetting that Biden had to do. So he's basically just been a blocker for the ones that they want to put in because they know he's falling apart.
I'm totally with you there. And again, maybe this is my own naivete, Raven Harrison, but I feel that most people, irrespective of party, if that were to happen, I think they would say, I didn't vote for that guy. Like, I honestly think a lot of Democrats would say, I didn't vote for Gavin Newsom or whomever you're putting in as the stand-in here. And I think they would take exception to that, and I think it would really hurt their campaign. Do you agree with me, disagree with me? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's how they should feel. But what I feel like the Democrats do a great job of, they have done a great job of pitting it as us as them. They're not giving them an option. There is no, well, we might just have to get behind Trump for this. They are, he is the devil. He's going to ruin everything. And they are really, they will just oust anybody who goes off of that line of thinking, out of the group think. So they have to vote together. They have to stick together. And the problem is going to be, it is going to destroy the country. I mean, we are busting at the seams. And what people need to do is stop making this an R or a D. This is, regardless, the country cannot sustain this. This is an unsustainable level of governance or lack thereof. The border is wide open. Inflation is still rampant. We are trillions of dollars in debt, and we are sending trillions more to Ukraine. We have vets and homeless, people that are starving on the streets, and we are importing thousands into the interior of our country by the day. He's trying to send out executive orders and mass blanket legislation to give amnesty to all these 11 plus million people they have let in here. The price of everything is soaring and crime is spiking everywhere. So when you look at this, this is absolutely a gift wrap of, you have to look at this for what it is. I tell people, before you go vote, go check your 401k, go to the grocery store and fill up your gas tank before you go vote. And
they're going to leave with a red MAGA hat if they do that.
Well, I'm telling you, that's where because these are kitchen table issues and they're falling on deaf Democrat ears. They are really just trying to advance. They've got nothing but abortion and Trump bad. They're asking the American people to ignore what they can see with their own eyes, which is he can't complete a coherent sentence, that the world is on fire right now. And for people who think, some of the older ones know that our country can't sustain this, we have got to push back on this or it will crumble.
Really well put, Raven Harrison. Folks, we're going to come right back with Raven Harrison, and we're going to wrap up here before we start Open Phone America. But I leave you with this thought before we return. Axios is reporting, and many others, New York Times and others, have reported that the Democrats have a big vulnerability, why they're losing black and Hispanic voters to the right. More when we return.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
By the way, your ratings are up. Congratulations, somebody. It's always nice to check. I like to see, even if they're friends, I like to see how are they doing. Are people listening, right? But right. You're doing great.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So a recent New York Times Siena College poll shows that support for non-white voters, from non-white voters, is dissipating for Democrats, in particular Biden. And this is shocking. And there's other polls that are out there showing that Trump is getting up to 38% of the Hispanic vote in particular. The jury's still out on what that number is going to look like ultimately, but it sounds like an increasing number, and it makes a lot of sense when I speak with people and when I see different things. Raven Harrison, what do you think about this departure of support from Black and Hispanic voters?
It is very profound because there's a saying that says what you fear, you create. And I feel like that's inadvertently what the Democrats have done. You know, their desperation to remove Trump has inevitably just elevated him to a new level. I mean, every time they attacked him, his fundraising went through the roof. He basically monopolized all of the media and attention because that's all they could talk about. So I think what you're seeing now is what they didn't realize is an unintended consequence of constantly indicting him and arresting him is that has now made him relatable among Black men in particular. So the population that is typically used to being the target of what you would say is oppression has now got relatability with President Trump. And then the handling of the situation in the Middle East, you know, with Israel being our ally, but Biden is literally funding both sides of the war. He is sending money to Hamas and Iran, and he's trying to say that he supports Israel. So his handling of that has caused him to lose a huge block of the Jewish vote. So what you're seeing, and Biden is old and incoherent and quite frankly ridiculous, and it does not appeal to the younger class of people, which is usually the solid base of the left. So they're losing it across, and you'll see the desperation grow.
Really well put. I agree with you on everything there. I think Biden's a disaster. I also think Trump had this appeal, you know, with lots of Black people, all sorts of Black people, not just Black men, rappers, athletes. You know, he was in entertainment and in sports promotion and had this whole background that I feel like they forgot. You know, and it's at least once a day when I'm scrolling through my social media, I see a clip of Mike Tyson going, I like Donald Trump. That was my guy. I made a lot of money with him. He talks about how Trump had his back. And it's just like these are very old ties that are apolitical.
Well, that's true. And also remember, these people really can respect the fact that Donald Trump stepped out of a billionaire lifestyle. He's one of the only, and that's something he did have in common with Kennedy. Kennedy was also the only person to lose net wealth coming in. Both were wealthy coming in. Both of them didn't need the office. He came in to help America. He did not need to do this. He had everything. So Obama said the American dream was to be Donald Trump. You know, so that's where I think he's become relatable of people seeing that he stepped out of his comfortable lifestyle to get in the trenches for America, and people respect that.
I think you're right. Raven Harrison, ravenharrison.com. Let everybody know how they can follow you on social media.
They can follow me at Raven, the Conservative Warrior, Raven_TX Warrior. The book is Raven's Mantle, available on Amazon, or they can get ravenharrison.com.
Get 2 copies of the book, folks. Raven Harrison, thank you for being with us. You're a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. Get the book, Raven's Mantle. Folks, we're coming right back. Open Phone America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join us on our late night national town hall conversation, give us a call. 833-482-5337. 833-4-Valdez is the number. And, of course, it's Open Phone America. I love Open Phone America. It's a tradition on this program dating back to the year I was born, believe it or not. 45 years ago, Larry King started that. It was championed by King and continued by the late, great Jim Bohannon. And who are we to change that type of tradition? So we are going to accept calls on any subject from anywhere in the country, as we are airing on hundreds of radio stations right now and on a handful of others on delay. And I'm looking forward to speaking with all of you. But I want to mention a couple of things. Tonight, I want to talk about a couple of, offbeat stories, which is also tradition on this program. But in particular, about a dad who took exception to how his daughter was being treated in school, as well as a new feature. We're doing the world premiere of The Creature from the Red and Blue Lagoon. Now, this is our swamp feature, a segment that was recommended by our producer, Alexander Hinton. And he did a great job putting together the imaging for it, and we're going to be premiering that tonight. You're going to get a taste of that, as well as be able to weigh in on those topics. And it has to do with two swamp creatures, dueling swamp creatures coming out of the Washington, D.C. swamp. The creature from the Red and Blue Lagoon, which is the swamp. And, of course, we're also going to discuss this story. It's out of New York, and this is an interesting one, right? Because a subway rider was on the train and got into an altercation with a shooter, with an armed shooter. And how it ended up is out of the movies, as some in Spanish would say, está de película. Listen to this.
It all unfolded just before 5 o'clock on the northbound A train here at the Hoyt-Schermerhorn station. Police tell us that a 32-year-old man got into the train at Nostrand Avenue when he was approached by a 36-year-old man acting aggressively. The two began arguing and then fighting, and police say that 36-year-old first pulled out a knife and then a gun. And that's when the other man grabbed that gun and shot the 36-year-old multiple times. He was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Witnesses tell us they were crying and huddled together. They say police came onto the train with guns drawn, telling everyone to stay down. And the man who fired was taken into custody. It's not clear at this point if he'll be charged or if he was acting in self-defense. In downtown Brooklyn, Lori Bordenero, CBS 2 News.
All right. That's, again, CBS News with the report there. And fascinating story, right? This is the stuff you see on television, where somebody gets into a fight and they take the gun away from the gunman and they end up shooting the gunman. This happened in real life on a New York City subway today. And I'll tell you, I don't know what to I don't know any of these details yet. This is a story that broke earlier today, and I'm looking at it for the first time now. And all I can tell you, I think this happened around 5 p.m. this afternoon, Thursday afternoon. Here's what I can tell you. I don't know who these people were, but I know the media. And I know when the media is not reporting race, typically that means there's somebody that's African-American involved in as either the victim or the assailant. That's just the way the media tends to work. Might be like an unwritten Associated Press rule, but it's never failed. If it were a white man that did the shooting or did the receiving the shot, that would be in the headline. And the headline I'm looking at is New York City strap hanger shoots aggressive rider in head after wrestling gun away from him during a fight, according to the cops. So this fight aboard a packed Brooklyn train took a horrific turn when one strap hanger wrestled the gun away from the other and shot him in the head, according to police. The violence on the rush hour northbound A train erupted when a 32-year-old man, you heard some of this in that report, but just to reiterate, boarding the Nostrand Avenue station, not far from where I grew up, honestly, at 4:45, that's according to the police. Guy says, "I'll beat you up." The alleged aggressor barked before hurling curses and trying to instigate the man to fight, according to footage obtained by the New York Post. And I'm looking, there's a video right here. Shoot. They start fighting. I'm looking at the brawl right here. I got no volume on this, though. Man, brutal. I can't get close enough to see who's who and what's what. Let me see. I'm giving you the play-by-play here. I don't know how much of this you've seen or heard. The guy's on top of one. The other guy goes into, looks like he's going into his bag. They're trying to break this fight up. And looks like he's going to pull something out. And they get into it. Looks like it's in the lining of a jacket. So far, yep, there it is. This is an African-American man. He pulls out the weapon. He brings it over to the other guy, who appears either white or Hispanic. Everybody's going crazy on the train right now. I wonder if there's audio to go with this. And, oh, my goodness. They're getting the whole thing on tape. Looks like he's wrestling him to the ground. People are involved. Everybody's looking. Well, anyway, I'll go back to the story. But it looks like the guy eventually pulls a gun on him and then blasts him. The guy who thought he was causing the damage. So, yep, my theory has proven true once again. I don't know why they use these racial rules when writing these reports, but that's what they do. And as we know more, I'll let you know. But it says people are screaming, come on, there's babies on the train here. One woman pleading. That didn't stop this 36-year-old man who pounced on the other man, pushing him into a two-seater, delivering several blows. And, man, this is a really interesting article. I'm going to share this on Twitter, formerly known as X, or the other way around. During the clash, the alleged aggressor, wearing all black, flashed what's believed to be a knife or a razor before digging through his jacket and pulling out the gun. The train car erupted into screams. The strap hangers rushed to the opposite side of the car, with several throwing themselves on the ground, according to the video, which I saw a part of. And let's see, I see the police have this guy in custody. Either doesn't look white. It looks either Hispanic or Arabic. Let me out is what many people were screaming. And ultimately, 4 shots were heard on the footage. The train doors opened as the gunshots rang out. Panicked commuters ran around. Cops were running all over the place, and they got this guy in custody. So, yeah, my supposition is that this guy's going to be charged not with self-defense and saving everybody that was on that train, but likely with killing this guy, even though this guy brought his hands to a gunfight, took the gun away from the gunman, and killed the gunman. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I have to eat these words, and I hope that I'm not correct. I really do. I hope that they say, look, this guy was just defending himself and everybody on that train. But that's what they did with Daniel Penny, right? And the next thing you know, this guy was being charged with just short of murder. And sadly, that's how these things go from time to time. So we're going to continue with your calls and more straight ahead. Our new feature, The Creature from the Red and Blue Lagoon. I also want to get your take on this story, your thoughts on this subway brawl where the guy gets disarmed and then shot with his own gun after instigating the fight and bringing the gun in the first place. So your thoughts on that. Plus, there's way more to come. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There's more news in your commentary, in your analysis, than there is on the news network.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
A sinister presence is stirring.
This week has been good bipartisan cooperation and a string of
a terror unlike anything you've ever seen.
Beer brewed here, it is used to make the brew beer in this fine Earth Rider.
No, I'm not a poor baby. I'm more reptilian and cold-blooded and go in to win the election.
You can run. You can hide. But can you escape the creatures from the Red and Blue Lagoon?
All right, that is the intro for this feature that we're going to be using this election year, the creatures from the Red and Blue Lagoon. And, of course, that's a play on the creature from the Blue Lagoon back in the day, Black Lagoon, excuse me. And the two clips I want to play today, the two swamp creatures we're talking about, are none other than the leaders in the United States Senate. That's right. You've got Senator Chuck Schumer, who is a fellow Brooklynite like me, and his counterpart in the Senate, the minority leader, Mitch the Turtle McConnell. And they're both there dueling over, should the United States be getting involved in Israeli democracy? This is something we saw President Obama do, and it's something that we're looking at Biden seem to be very happy with, along with Schumer. And I think we have no business in that. At least, our government, these are things you do in a clandestine manner with the CIA. You don't sit there and do it overtly. You do it covertly. But anyway, let's listen to what Senator Chuck Schumer had to say.
If Prime Minister Netanyahu's current coalition remains in power after the war begins to wind down and continues to pursue dangerous and inflammatory policies that test existing U.S. standards for assistance, then the United States will have no choice but to play a more active role in shaping Israeli policy by using our leverage to change the present course. The United States bond with Israel is unbreakable, but if extremists continue to unduly influence Israeli policy, then the administration should use the tools at its disposal to make sure our support for Israel is aligned with our broader goal of achieving long-term peace and stability in the region. I believe this would make a lasting two-state solution more likely.
So there you have Chuck Schumer again, two-state solution. The whole problem is I don't think they want a two-state solution, right? This has been part of the issue. If that were the fix, we would have done it a million years ago. It's not the fix. It's literally never worked. They don't want, Hamas is clear, they don't want a two-state solution. They want a one-state solution where they're there and the Israelis are gone, wiped off the map. How do you negotiate with someone like that? Well, anyway, Mitch McConnell had some thoughts on this. Mitch the Turtle McConnell, he weighed in as well. Listen to this.
It is grotesque and hypocritical for Americans who hyperventilate about foreign interference in our own democracy to call for the removal of a democratically elected leader of Israel. This is unprecedented. We should not treat fellow democracies this way at all. Things that upset left-wing activists are not a prime minister's policies. There is Israel's policies. Make no mistake, the Democratic Party doesn't have an anti-Bibi problem. It has an anti-Israel problem. Israel is not a colony of America whose leaders serve at the pleasure of the party in power in Washington. Only Israel's citizens should have a say in who runs their government. This is the very definition of democracy and sovereignty. Either we respect their decisions or we disrespect their democracy.
Now, listen, I don't like Mitch McConnell. I don't appreciate him most of the time. I will say the words he just spoke I agree with, and I wish that he would espouse those same sentiments when it came to Puerto Rico. I wish he would respect sovereignty of the vote of the Puerto Ricans when they voted to become a state. Why wouldn't he? It was an overwhelming number, something like 87%, 3 different occasions. Right? Going to keep using the same argument that, we're all but guarantee a Democrat senator. It's not even true. I mean, anybody who has a thinking mind and can do a little research knows that that's not the case. You know, Puerto Rico and the let's see, I think it's Puerto Rico, Guam, maybe who else? Those are the two that I know. They have something called a shadow government. Not like in the sense of a deep state, but like a legitimate shadow government that if they were ever to become granted statehood status, these people would become members of Congress and whatnot, right? Outside of the resident commissioner. And right now, if I've had her on the show before last year, and maybe it's time to bring her back on, just so you can hear what one of the current congressional delegate members that is elected in Puerto Rico, and this isn't about Puerto Rico, this is about Netanyahu and Israel, and I'm going to get to that, but just making a sidebar comment. This particular delegate is to the right of Ronald Reagan, to the right of Donald Trump, right? Incredibly conservative. And to think that it's a foregone conclusion that you would get these people, it's wrong. It's not even true. So McConnell, I say you're full of it. You are part of the lagoon problem that we have, the red and blue lagoon, the swamp. And he is right in the sense that we've got to stop meddling in other people's affairs. There's a time and a place for meddling, and this isn't it. To sit here and weaponize our government to eliminate Netanyahu because we don't like the way he's handling things. I mean, I'm sure it's been done in the past, and we've seen it happen, but this isn't the time or place, right? It's not like he's pulling a Putin and he's trying to invade and take this land for himself. They had this land, and they gave it to the Palestinians. And they elected Hamas, and they've done nothing in 18 years that they've been there. And now the United States is going to build them a port on your tax dollar and my tax dollar. Anyway, with a minute to go, let's go to Paul, Boise, Idaho. Very quickly, your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Stellar show, a cornucopia of great topics. Yeah, I'm disappointed in what Chuck had to say. I think he blew it. He should have done it through clear channels some other way than to do it out in the open like he did in the Senate today. And I think McConnell was showboating more than anything else. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to look and sound good, and I don't think he did either. So
I think you're right. I think you're right, Paul. Your analysis on this is spot on. He didn't look good, and he didn't sound good either. And Schumer, he's just despicable, in my opinion. The fact that we're going to try and overthrow a government because they decided to defend themselves. And I understand the other side of the argument. It's a genocide. It's a genocide. I just don't see it that way. But, folks, we continue with your calls and more. 833-4825-337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We'll be right back.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
This video shows a parent on Monday who was supposed to be picking up his child entering into a classroom at the high school and immediately confronting a student. I didn't know to it. The criminal complaint identifies the parent as Aaron Thomas of Gibbstown. The video goes on to show Thomas going back and forth with a student, who Thomas is heard in the video saying was allegedly bothering his daughter. Moments later, it appears that an adult tries to intervene and calm the situation down, when things quickly escalated again, with Thomas then beginning to argue with another student in the classroom. Thomas is being charged with several offenses, which include entering in an unauthorized section of the school, threatening to punch and knock out a student, and also committing assault, specifically by grabbing the student's arm and getting in his face.
So they're charging the dad with being a dad, right? Aaron Thomas, 38, filmed entering the classroom at Paulsboro High School in Gloucester County in New Jersey on Monday. demanding that this teenage boy apologize to his daughter. You got a problem with my daughter? He asked it to. What was this guy's name? Let me go back. Aaron Thomas. Okay. I was going to give him a Jersey accent. Apologize to my daughter. Listen, good for him. I totally support this, honestly. I know people are going to say, how do you support? He broke into the school. I know. It's just, I think back to like an era where what did dads do when I was a little kid? This is what they did, right? Or they went over and they talked to the other people's parents. Anyway, the frightened child replied that he didn't do anything to her. But Thomas apparently didn't accept that as a valid response. His voice grew louder and more adamant. He said, you heard what the F I said? Apologize to my daughter now. Yeah, that's probably a little off the deep end. Probably should have waited. Caught the kid outside. Anyway, an adult could be seen intervening. You heard that in the report. Somebody said, this is just going to go off the rails here for a second. It's not worth it. I'm going to just share my thoughts on this. I always see this. People go, it's not worth it. It's not worth it when your blood is boiling, right? And your adrenaline is pumping through your body. And the only thing that will satisfy this is the feeling of some human flesh beneath your knuckles as you pound somebody's face. That is the only thing, I think, that satisfies this fit of rage. And someone to shout, it's not worth it. What's not worth it? Getting arrested for disorderly persons or a simple assault or even an aggravated assault? What's the outcome there? And I'm just, hypothetically speaking here. But really, what's the outcome? If this happens in New York City, maybe in Gloucester County, he's going to get arrested and they're going to press charges. But if this happens in New York City, is it not worth it? I think it's very worth it. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But what is the possible downside? Right? Man, maybe the guy pulls out a knife and a gun like the guy on the train. But the other side of it is you've fulfilled your duty. You've done what you had to do. I don't know. I think when people yell this, it's not worth it, I think it really can go both ways. I think there's times where it might be worth it. That might be the only communication you can have with somebody is speaking that way. I don't know. Maybe that's the Neanderthal in me. I don't know. But anyway, the guy says he can be seen making some sort of physical contact with the second student. Police are alleging that he grabbed the student's arm. And let's see, there's a photo here. He's yelling at the guy. He's a pretty young guy, 38 years old. He's younger than me. It remains unclear. That means if he's 38 and his daughter's in high school, how old? I guess I was 38 when my daughter was in high school too. So, all right. It remains unclear. No, I was not. I was a little older than that, I think. Or maybe my first daughter. It remains unclear who let Thomas into the classroom and how he tracked down the student. Who cares? It's not that hard. Anyway, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this stuff because this is very interesting to me, right? I think it's obviously I don't condone anybody going anywhere, and I'm not telling people to go beat people up. I'm not. I am saying, though, there's times where if something happens, if a member of your family is attacked somehow, isn't the right thing to do to go and protect them and retaliate if need be? I think yes is the answer. And somebody to yell, it's not worth it. What do you mean it's not worth it? This is my daughter's honor. It's my family. How could my family not be worth it, right? And I know what they're saying. They're saying, look, it's not worth getting in trouble or getting sued or getting whatever. And I don't know. I think a little bit more practically or maybe a little more recklessly sometimes. And main thing I'm going to say is I'm grateful I'm not in this position and I don't have to make those decisions. Thank God. But let's go to Becky. She's in Illinois on WHOW. Becky, I know you had some comments on a few things, and we're going to get to your comments. But I'm curious to know your thoughts on this dad barging into the school and grabbing a kid by the arm and forcing him to apologize to his daughter for whatever he may or may not have done.
I'd have went to the principal.
Yeah.
I'd have had a talk with the principal and let the principal bring the kid in and discuss it.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know what? And true full disclosure, I once had a situation in my life where my daughter, with some kid, similar type of thing, where I went down to the school. And that's exactly what I did. I barged into the principal's office, and I told him, I said, if you don't fix this, I will. And that is exactly what I did. I didn't go after any children. I took it to the principal, and they did resolve the matter. So I think there's wisdom in what you're saying. But I think sometimes, in other situations, not with little kids, I don't think anybody should be beating up little kids. That you're going to get in big trouble for. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do to defend your family. Now, tell me about this trip you're thinking of taking, Becky.
Not. My family's taken a cruise, and I am absolutely, totally terrified. I want opinions from anybody. They're taking this cruise to Mexico and Honduras, and I am terrified. My whole entire family is going to go. And
now, you're afraid of the cruise, like of the ship?
What?
Are you afraid of being on a cruise ship?
No, I'm scared of what they're going to run into. God, we don't know what's going on down there. It's not been good.
Yeah, but those are those day trips, where you're going to dock and spend 8 or 9 hours on a beach and that type of thing. I'd say that's probably the safest way to do one of those places. These are big tourist destinations, at least Mexico. I don't know much about Honduras. I do know I've been to Mexico, and it's great. It's great for that stuff, and it's beautiful, snorkeling, all that stuff, if you're like in that part of the Mexico that borders the Caribbean Sea. But I would think that you're generally going to be all right. I think if you were staying at a resort and leaving the resort and going into the town, then you may want to be a little more careful because, those things happen. I mean, it's not unheard of for people to get kidnapped in Mexico for peanuts. They'll call whatever the rest of your family's left in the States and say, hey, we've got her. We've got Becky. Give me $4,000. They come up with these really low ransoms that they think you'll be able to come up with very quickly to have a swift payday. However, whenever we've seen those things happening, it's never off of a cruise ship, at least from what I've seen. It's usually people that are staying in town, in the downtown, outside of a large hotel, a smaller hotel, and, doing their out and about sightseeing where they get into that drama. And I'm always of the opinion, be careful, but don't live in fear. You can't live your life in fear. You got to do what you got to do, Becky.
The whole family.
Yeah, what are you going to do, stay home and be the one party pooper?
I can't go. There's no way I could go. But
Why?
All my grandchildren and my daughter and her husband, and they're all going, and it just scares me because there's been so many, many problems. Even Mexico's had their share of it, and I'm just terrified.
Are you not going because you're terrified, or you're just not going because you're unable to go for other reasons?
I'm blind.
So does that stop you from going on a cruise?
Oh, God, yes. What are you going to look at?
That doesn't mean that you don't go on a cruise. You're going to spend time with your family, though. Your
I'll
whole
see
family.
I'll see them next week. But it's just I told her today I'm absolutely terrified of them going. They went and got their passports and everything, and I'm scared to death.
Well, take heart. I would say take heart. I think you've got to be positive here. You got to be optimistic and expect the best for this one. Typically I'm a cynic. I'm very jaded in life with a lot of things, and I always say, hope for the best, expect the worst. But I think in that situation, I think hold on to hope, and I think you're going to be all right. Becky, thank you for sharing everything with us. Big shout out to everybody listening in Bloomington, Illinois, WHOW. Folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, we've got calls from all over the place. We got Montana. We also got Wisconsin. Let's go to Wisconsin. We're going to check in with Brian. Brian's on WIZM. Brian, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Welcome.
Hey, Rich. Just want to say thank you for everything you're doing. I appreciate your views on a lot of things.
Thank you.
I guess the story that sparked me to call in, being that I've got two daughters, both of them in school, one in high school, one younger. I get what you're saying. I, too, have been in a position where I did what you did. I went to the principal's office and said, you fix it or I will. And it got taken care of. But just that story intrigued me. I get your view, I guess, on how you stand on that.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not telling people to go out there and break into schools and fight your kids' battles. But I am saying, there's a time and a place, right, where you may need to do stuff like that. And you can't shy away from those moments. Thankfully, that this doesn't seem to be that moment.
And I want
you're breaking up, Brian. I'm sorry about that. We'll put you on hold. Maybe we'll get you back and once the line is a little bit clearer. But I appreciate your kind words and your call. Big shout out to everybody on WIZM in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I want to also swing over to Montana because we got our buddy Frank in Evergreen, Montana on KOFI. Frank in Evergreen, what's on your mind this evening?
Hi. Rich, I had to look it up on the military site for the Navy for what they put into these MRE meal packages that they're dropping on Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's amazing.
Not pork.
They actually have little tiny boxes of Captain Crunch cereal. And
oh, wow. I love Captain Crunch.
At one time, Captain Crunch was once demoted by the Navy because he had 3 stripes, which signifies that he's only a commander. He's subordinate to a captain. He doesn't have the IQ to run a ship like a captain. So it's just amazing. But
that's funny. There's a story in the news today about a Navy commander that was not dismissed, but yeah, he was dismissed over a loss of confidence. It was actually in the news just today. Listen to this, Frank. Navy fires USS Ohio commanding officer, Captain Kurt D. Balanya. He was fired as commanding officer of the USS Ohio due to a loss of confidence in his ability to command, the Navy said. The commanding officers are held to high standards of personal and professional conduct. They're expected to uphold the highest standards of responsibility, reliability, and leadership, and the Navy holds them accountable when they fall short of those standards. So I'm wondering what they did. What did this, not Captain Crunch, but this Captain Kurt D. Balanya, what did he do? I don't know, Frank, but it looks like you're onto something here.
Yeah. Hey, take care now.
All right, thanks, Frank. I appreciate it. And I don't know. I had no idea they were sending Captain Crunch over to the folks in Gaza. I would presume that they're not sending pork because I know that they don't eat pork. It's a majority Muslim area. And, I don't know if there's a bunch of hot dogs in MREs. I think I ate one once years ago, but I haven't eaten that in a long time. And it is interesting to see the lengths that we're going through to try and ensure the most peaceful resolution to this conflict that we have. All right, let's see. I have to take a pause here, but we're going to come back. We have more calls, and we're going to do some wrap-up. So when we come back, we're going to go to another caller from Missouri on KFRU. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833 833-4Valdez. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
My hands across America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back, familia. We continue with your calls and more on Open Phone America, where you get to weigh in on everything that's going on in America at night. And I want to go to a town called Mexico. It's in Missouri. KFRU is the station. David is our caller. Go right ahead, David. Welcome.
How you doing, Rich? This is my third time calling, and I do enjoy your show.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you calling in. What's on your mind tonight, David? Welcome.
I just wanted to call and let the lady know that she's worried about her family going on a cruise down to Honduras. Me and my wife took the same cruise down there just almost 10 years ago, June of 2014. I realized 10 years may have changed a lot of things, but at the time, they had a carnival compound there.
Where, I guess, they dock and they do what they do. That makes sense. I know some of these cruises also have like private islands that they rent out so that it's a lot safer. And I'm with you on that one, David. I am with you. I think when it comes to those things, many of these places, these destinations, they make their entire economy function based on these cruise liners pulling up. So I think, everybody has a vested interest to make sure that people remain safe. And I agree with you. You've gotta let your faith, kind of guide you here and not be nervous, fear not, right? The Bible says it, I think 365 times, fear not. David, thank you for your call. Big shout out to Mexico, Missouri. I didn't even know there was a Mexico, Missouri, by the way. But anyway, there's some reports before we wrap. There's some reports that former Treasury, I think he was Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, is putting together a coalition of folks to buy TikTok, or he's looking to. And we have the audio on it. We just don't have enough time to play it all. But I will get into that tomorrow, and we'll break down the rest of, what happened this week and some other topics. And thank you for putting up with me yet again. I think we did the job of providing a little bit of old school radio during the late night hours from 10 to 1 a.m. It's my pleasure to be with you every evening. Very grateful for the audience. Love it when you call in. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez. Hasta la próxima.